Will the Bruins abandon the goalie rotation, and can they head back to Boston with a 3-1 series lead over the Toronto Maple Leafs? I'm teeing up Game 4 of this playoff series today with Belle Fraser from the Hockey News.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Friday, April 26th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your day every day. Free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Put on your monocle, throw on your top hat, download Monopoly Go free in the App Store and on Google Play. All right, Game 4 is set for Saturday night in Toronto. The Bruins looking to take a commanding 3-1 series lead. And Belle Fraser of the Hockey News jumping on to discuss a whole bunch of topics, including who's going to start, Jake DeBrusk performance so far, whether David Pastrnak can break out in a big way offensively. We'll get to that here in a moment. First, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. For those of you who are new to the podcast, I'm a lifelong Bruins fan. Been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years. Been hosting this podcast for 5 years. Prior to that, a full-time hockey news editor at The Score. And looking forward to what should be a very raucous Game 4 Saturday night in Toronto. Let's preview that now with Belle Fraser from the Hockey News. All right, I'm happy to be joined again on the podcast by Belle Fraser of the Hockey News. And we're previewing Game 4, talking about the series so far. How are you doing this morning, Belle?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks so much for making some time.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things, but probably the biggest question on Bruins fans' minds is who's going to get the start in Game 4? Do you think they're going to stick with the rotation, or has Jeremy Swayman, he's got I think a 955 save percentage so far.
Yeah.
Do you think they're going to stick with the hot hand here?
Before the playoffs started, I was like, they kind of have to do the rotation just based on last year. And then, it's been such a cornerstone of their success this season. It's been talked about 1,000 times before and during the playoffs, but don't go away from the rotation that got you to this point. But I think you have to stick with Swayman. And playoffs are different, we say it all the time, playoffs are a whole new season. It's a whole new animal. And I think Swayman, even though Ullmark had a great game and great Game 2, gave the Bruins a chance to win, that game was not on him. Swayman has, I think, kind of a mental edge over the Leafs. They can't beat him. They haven't beat him this series. They couldn't beat him in the regular season. And like you said, his save percentage is out of this world against them. And I think, too, beyond the stats and the numbers, his composure, his poise with the chaos playing in Toronto, that's not an easy building to win in. And obviously they were over 100 hits again in that game. There's a lot of after the whistle scrums in front of his crease, and he's either talking to the other team or he goes to the corner and kind of is really locked in. And, we talked to him in Boston and he's really embracing the opportunity. This was the first time he ever got to start the series. He said he's smiling the whole game. So I think everyone knows this. He's such a competitive guy and he wants the net. He said that after Game 3. He said, I don't want to stop. I want to keep going. So, he's going to have his game face on if he gets back in. And I think it's so hard because Ullmark doesn't not deserve the net, but it's just when things are working in the playoffs, you got to stick with it. It's such a small sample size and small margin of error that if Swayman's winning, I feel like you have to go with him.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of torn on this one. Like you said, Ullmark, obviously a very good goalie. As of still today, he's the reigning Vezina Trophy winner.
Yep.
My thing is if they were going to abandon the rotation for Game 4, why even do it at all? Do you know what I mean? I that's what I'm kind of torn about whether or not they're going to go back to Ullmark, because they said they had a plan. They were going to stick to it. If they're throwing it out for game 4, then why even have done it for game 2 in the first place? Not that game 2 loss was on Ullmark by any stretch. That game winner by Austin Matthews, I don't know who's stopping that. Any goalie. But yeah, that's why I'm a bit torn, because it's like, if you're gonna do it, then really do it and not give it up after one game. I don't know. That's my only hesitation in saying.
That's interesting too, because if you start Swayman for game 4, do you go back to Ullmark for game? Because everyone's saying like the rotation doesn't exactly need to be like 1-1 like it was in the regular season, but it is like, if you go with Swayman game 4, are you sticking with him for the series?
Right.
Or do you just kind of put him in until he loses? Like,
right.
So yeah, I mean, it is obviously a game by game decision. Jim Montgomery he's cracked some funny jokes, avoiding telling the media who's starting. But yeah, I think for them, truly, I think they had a plan. But I think you have to rethink it now.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that same kind of idea, that was my take on the rotation coming in. Not necessarily like someone starts the odd game, someone starts the even games, but it's like, oh yeah, maybe if they start Swayman game 4, they go up 3-1, throw Ullmark in there because you still have a good shot at winning and you're keeping him fresh. Or like the first sign of trouble with either of them, you don't hesitate to make a switch, kind of thing. That was my thinking of the rotation, that at some point both guys are going to play. It's just a matter of if you're like very stringent in game 1, game 2, game 3, or you're just free to, start this guy because he's playing hot, go with Ullmark in game 5, or if Swayman lets in a couple early ones, then you just go to Ullmark kind of right away. That's the luxury they have of having like 2 elite goaltenders, basically, is that they can just use them whenever they want.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a good problem to have. Like, if any other team in the playoffs right now got a performance like they did like the Bruins did from Ullmark or Swayman, like, they would feel really good about their goaltending. So the fact that, the Bruins can choose from both of them. But I think that speaks to it too. Like, if any other team had Swayman's 28-save performance in Toronto, they would 1,000% put him in the next game.
Yeah.
Granted, they don't have any other option, but I think when you look at it from that perspective, it's kind of like, you would stick with him. But obviously, it's a unique situation, and they feel comfortable playing in front of both of them. Obviously, the game doesn't change that much. Kevin Shattenkirk had an interesting comment a couple days ago saying that Linus kind of comes out and plays the puck a little bit more. So for the defensive end, that's kind of something they think about. But other than that, that room has been playing with both guys all season long. So nothing changes in the playoffs. They're kind of like, it's such a big conversation outside the locker room, but within it, we don't really, talk about it.
Right. Yeah, I'm very interested to see what Jim Montgomery is going to decide here. We have the extra day that the coach was kind of lamenting in Toronto, being
too much time in Toronto.
Yeah, exactly. Too much downtime. So he's got some more time to think about it. We're going to talk more about game 4 and what's been working for the Bruins here in this series as the podcast continues. When you're trying to put together your work team, don't you wish you could draft it like a fantasy team? Just handpick the best stars for your business. Well, you can basically do that with Indeed. It's the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. You don't have to spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills. You can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessments, and virtual interviews. Indeed knows that when you're growing your business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Terms and conditions do apply, and the cost per application pricing is not available for everyone. But if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Check Indeed.com/lockedon. All right, Belle. So the big story for me in game 3 was Brad Marchand. I said that was probably, I would say that it was his best game or biggest game as captain of the Boston Bruins, one of his biggest performances in the playoffs. Yeah, maybe ever. Game 7. Someone mentioned Game 7 in 2011. Obviously, he scored 2 goals then.
Yeah.
But I had kind of thought before that game that there was a bit of pressure on him to kind of establish himself as captain and kind of, create his own story, his own legacy as captain. I thought it was hilarious that Sheldon Keefe said that Marchand like gets calls or like has the benefit of the doubt from the referees. Just talk about Brad Marchand in Game 3 and kind of what you've been seeing from him all season long as he's taken on the captaincy.
Yeah, it's been a storyline all season long. Just how do you balance being the captain of, such a classy organization, original 6, and you look at the guys before him, but then also Brad Marchand is such a successful hockey player in the NHL and specifically for the Bruins because of his edge, his snarl. He's out there, he's in guys' faces. So he talked about that at the end of the season. It was kind of a development period. In the beginning of the season, he said he was thinking too much about it and got a little bit away from his game, which you would expect. But I think Game 3 was the perfect kind of culmination of Brad Marchand as a captain because, like you said, post-game, the Leafs were all upset about Marchand not getting any calls and drawing penalties instead. Meanwhile, the Maple Leafs went 0 for 5 on the power play.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
I think it's not the best look to come out and complain about calls to the media after you lost when you weren't able to convert on the calls you did get.
Exactly.
Like, okay, if Marchand got called for two penalties, then go 0 for 7 or 1 for 6, So anyways, I thought that was an interesting take after even when you got a man advantage, you weren't able to use it.
Yeah.
But for him, I think his leadership on and off the ice, he pulled his team back into that game. Not that they were fully out of it, but scoring and responding so quickly after the Leafs scored, that was huge. You could just feel the momentum completely shift. And you saw in his reaction to his goals, like he is obviously fully bought in, but he hit a slump in the second half of the season. His consistency wasn't fully there. And I think that's always on players' minds heading into the postseason. So must have felt good to just get those off his back and, not fully win that game for them. It was a team effort. And I think that's part of the reason the Bruins have had so much success is they're getting full team contributions. But, he had a captain performance and that's what you need. And it's good for the bench. It's good for the room to see him in his element. And I think he's probably eating it up. The Matthew Nyes quotes too, like the rookies coming out and complaining about Marchand. So I think he lives off of that stuff. And it shows he's playing well. The fact that he could get under their skin, be pesty, but also have a 2-goal night, that is Brad Marchand. And to see him at the top of his game right now is only good news for the Bruins going forward.
And it was obviously him mixing it up with Tyler Bertuzzi that led to Trent Frederic's goal, which, Ilya Samsonov's probably glad that more people are talking about all this kind of stuff than that goal because that was not, like we talked about, Boston's luxury in goaltending. That, I think I saw this morning, Fluto Shanzawa, The Athletic, he wrote a piece and it was like, that shot had less than a 1% chance of going in. So I've been saying that all series long. Like, Samsonov is incredibly vulnerable. Just get the puck on net. And I was so glad that Frederic did it then. Marchand did it on his game winner because there had been times earlier where he was kind of deferring or dropping passes. So, that's huge for me. I just want them to keep shooting on Ilya Samsonov because chances are there was even I think off a face-off at center where they shot it in and he was like, he didn't even know it was coming in. It like hit him on the chest. They could have scored from anyways, keep shooting is my thing. And that Frederic goal was huge there. Another guy who's shooting a lot, scoring a lot is Jake DeBrusk. He too had a slow kind of lead up to the playoffs. Talk about his performance so far and what that means for the team to get him going for sure.
Yeah, I remember a week ago doing like a playoff preview and we were saying Jake DeBrusk and Trent Frederic will be keys to this team making an actual run. And I think looking at Frederic first, just like that goal, even though there was, like you said, less than a 1% chance of that going in, probably not a shot that Montgomery would encourage all the time, like perimeter floater. When
exactly.
You're didn't let the team get back to set up, but obviously it worked out. And I think that's a type of goal that Frederic needs. You know, he has an empty netter, and I'm not going to call it a fluky goal because it was a real goal, but just to get on the scoreboard and to have that confidence. He's a guy that, you know, Don Sweeney was talking about when he plays with pace and emotion, the rest follows, and that's kind of perfect for playoffs. And I think for him on the third line, he was moved over to center because Geekie moved up to the second line. Jim Montgomery completely put his lines in a blender for game 3. And it worked. You know, Frederic was at center a lot in the first half of the season, and that's when he went on that really long hot streak. So I think he's comfortable there and obviously comfortable driving play there. So hopefully that just continues. And then Jake DeBrusk, I mean, everyone's been hard on the guy.
Yeah.
Rightfully so. Like, you need your top 6 winger to be a top 6 winger to, you know, be contributing. He had 1 point in the last 10 regular season games. Now he has 5 points in the last 3 games in the playoffs. And that's just huge. Like, we talk about depth scoring, and the Bruins bottom 6 has been really good, but that only matters if your top guys are going to. It can't all be your bottom 6 guys having a character gritty game. Like, we all love the Johnny Beecher and the Pat Maroon, but like you need your top guys to go. And I think Jake DeBrusk, I don't know what it is about the Toronto Maple Leafs too that brings it out of him, but it's really important. And he talked about it after game 1. He said, I was really disappointed in my regular season. I did not like how I played, but now there's bigger goals and it's kind of a time to reset. And he's still playing for a contract.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Yeah, so I think it's obviously playoffs are a different sample size, but he's showing how effective he can be, how much he wants it too. You know, there's another level of desperation to his game. And I think his two-way game and his defensive details are really shining through now, because those are things he really had to work on in the regular season when he wasn't scoring. You know, having a plan B when your plan A isn't going. And now he's kind of seeing them all come together now, where he's able to still, you know, have a little Charlie Coyle in him, but have 5 points, you know? So I think it's so huge for the Bruins, and just for him, you know, hopefully that keeps going. And that's what they were missing in a lot of their slumps this season was top 6 contributions. And yeah, so you're just happy for him and happy for the Bruins that they can rely on their first and second lines to go out 100%.
There. And you mentioned earlier the Leafs going 0 for 5 in game 3. I think an underappreciated part of Jake's game is the fact that he's out there killing penalties and doing it very, very well. Like a few years ago, like under Bruce Cassidy, we wouldn't have, well, maybe he started under Bruce, but like the beginning of his career, you wouldn't have seen him out in those defensive situations. So the fact that he's developed that game and become one of their better penalty killers, and they're keeping the Leafs off the board is huge for sure. Yeah. What do you think of the penalty kill so far? And who else is a big key to that, do you think?
Yeah, I think special teams in general too. The penalty kill has been great, but I feel like the Bruins kind of knew that all season. Like if they needed to kill off a penalty, they could probably do it. But the power play, I think it was 3 for 27 in the last 10 games of the regular season. And I remember when it was kind of the beginning of that drought, Montgomery was like, I'm not worried. Like, we have the personnel. And evidently, like, personnel didn't matter because he moves Brad Marchand and Charlie McAvoy down to the second unit. And it worked great. You know, Kevin Shattenkirk gets moved up to the first unit, and then Pat Maroon was there. James Van Riemsdyk was back at the net front. And then Jake DeBrusk is down there with the second unit. But they have, what is it? 5 power play
so,
goals?
Yeah. Jake has 3 on his own.
Yeah. I think they have 5 power play goals in 3 games. So I mean, that's so important too. Again, like I'm just thinking about the preview we wrote for the playoffs, and it was like special teams need to get going. Power plays need to get going. If you're down a goal, up a goal, tied, and you get on a 2-minute, 4-minute, 5-minute, whatever it is, third period, second period, it doesn't really matter. Any chance you have to extend a lead, to build an edge in the playoffs, you need to take it. And the power play has looked great. And Pavel Zacha was kind of talking about them being more direct and not thinking too much about it, and cycling the puck, being quick with it. When they move the puck faster, it kind of all works better. And then Shattenkirk was kind of funny talking about it because he's kind of manning that first unit now after getting back in the lineup. And he said, obviously, like Pastrnak should be the first option. He wants to be the first option. But he was like, he said something like, I'm not afraid to get my head bit off by Pastrnak if I like go opt for someone else, because everyone knows he's going to be there and they're looking for that. So I think you've seen that from Shattenkirk. He's just getting pucks on net and relying on the guys in front to kind of dump them in. And it's really worked. He has a pretty clear shot. But it's been the second unit, honestly, that's gotten most of the power play goals.
Unit,
and that's what the first, second unit, it's hard to call them that. And I think that was the goal. Even Danton Heinen was talking about it going to the playoffs. You want to have a 1A, 1B power play.
Yeah.
That's how most of the successful teams do it. And then the guys are less tired. You can do 1 minute for one unit, one for the second. So I think that's been great. And it also just shows, Montgomery's adjustments. I know they can catch some flack sometimes. They feel a little bit random, but he did that and it's been rolling. And I think the guys have liked it being a 1A, 1B, where you kind of know both units aren't just out there eating time, that both of them can score and have.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the lineup or the line changes. Montgomery does like to cook. I was worried that he might be overcooking a little bit or overthinking it for game 3. It paid off. We're going to talk about whether or not some more lineup changes are coming for game 4 and what the outlook is for that game here as the podcast continues. Now, I've been told that I'm a bit of a competitive person, and my competitive side is a huge fan of Monopoly Go. I love to break out my monocle, put on my top hat, and sit down with one of the best mobile games that I've ever played. It's a great twist on Monopoly. You can play not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. The best part, though, is messing with friends and family. I can charge them rent on iconic properties, can heist their vaults of riches for myself, and the leaderboard shows me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. It's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments and earn huge rewards. Get in the game, join your friends, download Monopoly Go, which is now free in the App Store and on Google Play. Are you a big Monopoly person, Belle?
Can't say I am, but maybe now I'll have to try it out after that read.
It's pretty fun. We have Lord of the Rings Monopoly at home, and I love to play that too.
I love it. That's awesome.
Cool. Anyways, game 4, just such a huge game. Obviously, you either go home up 3-1 or the Leafs make it a new series. One guy that I'm looking to have a huge game is David Pastrnak. He's played very well so far. I mentioned yesterday on X that he does only have 7 shots in the series, which is less than Brandon Carlo, but he's got a team high 22 attempts. Obviously, the Leafs are keying in on him, blocking a lot of his shots. But I'd love to see him kind of have like the kind of game that Austin Matthews had in game 2 or the kind of game that Marchand had in game 3. What's the key for him in terms of having kind of one of those defining offensive games?
Yeah, I think the good thing so far about him is he doesn't look frustrated out there. I think obviously he would love to be scoring. That's his purpose on this team, but at least he's not showing it. He's not going back to the bench and slamming his stick and, that type of thing. So I think he knows it's going to drop. Everyone knows it's going to drop. And, DeBrusk got moved up to that line with him and Zacha. So I don't know if that gives it a different look. I don't know. Who knows if that's going to stick because, game to game. But I think he just has to keep to what he's doing. It sounds cliche, but they always say, like, you have to just be patient and stick to the process. And I think if he starts doing too much is when things wouldn't work. The beauty of David Pastrnak is all of his highlight reel goals he makes look so easy and simple because that's how he does it, So I think for him, it's don't overcomplicate things just because it's not going in right now. And then on the flip side of that, I think defensively to look at going into next game, what's that going to, Mason Lohrei was in on the first pair with Charlie McAvoy. Matt Grzelcyk was sidelined, and then Parker Wotherspoon's on the third pair in place of Andrew Peeke, which was just such a brutal loss for the team and for him, coming over for Columbus, first NHL career playoffs. He was pretty excited for that. But I thought Wotherspoon did a pretty good job. You know, he blocked that shot in the knee his first shift, and I was like, this has to be a joke.
Yeah, like 10 seconds into his first shift or something.
Yeah, but he bounced back, and I think, you know, he wasn't a liability in any sense. And Mason Lohrei, even though, you know, he had 2 penalties, I believe, he held his own as a rookie in that environment on first player minutes. And I think Montgomery has talked about it all season long, but he wants him to pay more attention and be a little more responsible defensively. Everyone knows he has that offensive, creative flair, and that's what's gotten him here. And also with his size, you know, you don't always see kind of that speed and offensive mindedness. But I think playing with McAvoy, a guy who is known for, you know, his offensive game, but is also can flip a switch and be so stay-at-home defenseman, physical, kind of shut it down. I like that pairing. But yeah, it's the defense has been interesting all season because, you know, Matt Grzelcyk has 80 more playoff games than Mason Lohrei, but also isn't wowing. And I think you know, with Derek Forbort coming back, maybe not coming back, that's going to throw kind of a wrinkle into it too, because I think Kevin Shattenkirk is kind of finding his footing again. And then I guess you have to keep Parker Wotherspoon on the third pair because you have no other option. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, you know, all the decisions. Montgomery makes it fun for us looking in warm-ups and practice, you know, goalie lines, pairs, but they've been pretty interchangeable this season. So I think defensively, if that switches, it's kind of more or less the same look than if you switch forward lines.
Yeah, I might be tempted to put Grzelcyk back in there for Lohrei just because of that experience, and he's probably maybe a bit hungrier or has a chip on his shoulder for being scratched, maybe. Yeah. I loved the forward line. I've liked Lauko's energy, but I really liked JVR being in there, just kind of having more of a nose for the net. We saw he had like 2 glorious chances to score.
Talk about a guy with experience too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that whole like playing against an old team factor, I don't think you can underrate that either. So I'd like to see him back in there. What are you expecting from Game 4? Do you think the Leafs are gonna just come out super hungry and take it to the Bruins? William Nylander remains a question mark with migraine issues, I guess, which a lot of people seem to make light of, but that's a very serious thing. Mitch Marner has been not great or getting a lot of pressure, which is good for the Bruins. Brad Marchand's in their heads. What do you think is going to happen on Saturday night?
Yeah, I mean, the Nylander thing, every pregame is really interesting to see if he's going in or not, because that completely changes the complexion of their offense. Like,
yeah, for sure.
The Leafs were so dangerous in the regular season because they have a league top scorer on basically every line, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, that will be a tell sign, but I think, you know, it's going to be a lot of the same. I think Game 3 was both teams showed up. Game 1, the Bruins kind of dominated. Game 2, the Leafs kind of got off to a quicker start, but Game 3 was like, okay, they're settling into the series. And you saw a real fight out of both of them. Obviously, the Leafs losing at home for them is just the worst. They're fighting for their lives because I mean, everyone knows you can come back from a 3-1 series against the Bruins, but they're playing for their playoff lives right now. Going down 3-1, heading back to TD Garden, that's a hard thing to come back to, even if you make it 3-2. So there has to be a higher level of desperation from them. But I think for the Bruins, they need that killer instinct. You know, they need to be able to go out there and just dominate. And I think it's a lot of sticking to what they've been doing. And I think you've seen that with the Bruins when they've had their good stretches is they just come out with the same game plan. And I think those guys too, like this is desperation hockey for them. They want to get out of the first round just as bad, if not more than the Leafs do. So should be good. And I think also too with the hits before Game 3, someone asked Jim Montgomery, like, the hits will probably slow down tonight? And he was like, yeah, guys just like get tired by this point. But then there were 100 and I think Bruins had 63, Leafs had 70 something. So I would expect that same edge, especially after, you know, Domi bumping into Swayman.
Yeah.
There was a couple unfinished business pieces for the last game. So I expect that to boil over. But yeah, I think both teams are viewing this as a must win, and it's going to be good. I mean, this series has been so fun, selfishly to watch. The storylines, the games themselves. So it should be good. And then either way, you know, 2-2, you don't want to drop a game, but 2-2 coming back to home
Yeah.
ice, like, stealing one in Toronto, you're not in a bad spot. So I think the Bruins are kind of in a good spot either way, whereas the Leafs, this is kind of do or die for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To have already stolen one on the road is huge for the Bruins. And I was going to mention too, that bump from Domi on Swayman, it was like a hit that wasn't recorded. And I think that moment might have sealed Swayman as the starter for game 4, because he's just obviously doing something to them. And not that putting Ullmark in would like ease them or like make them feel more confident, but Swayman's just, he just has something on the Leafs, and I don't think
it's a mental edge. They know they can beat Ullmark, and that's nothing on Ullmark's, play. It's just unfortunate he was the guy in net when they won. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't mess around with that. Just take every opportunity to just finish it and put Swayman back in there. That's what I think for sure. Well, Belle, thank you so much for taking some time to chat, and hopefully the playoff run goes longer so that we can talk more Bruins hockey here before the season's over. Remind people where they can find your Bruins coverage and where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, for Bruins coverage, it's the Boston Bruins hockey news site. It's in my Twitter bio, Belle Fraser 1. Also some BU coverage and New England prep coverage over there too, if you're interested. But Bruins, is the hockey news.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks so much. And I'll be back on Monday to hopefully discuss a win in game 4, looking ahead to game 5. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Bruins, Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day.